My mother thinks family is only about blood, so she left my adopted daughter out of the inheritance. What she didn't know. My dad saw her cruelty coming from a mile away and wrote a legal, undo button into his will. You're watching Real Reddit Revenge, and today we're looking at a grandmother who learned the hard way that family isn't a club you can gatekeep, especially when a military lawyer and a secret inheritance are involved. My name is Morgan Vance. I'm 35, a major in the Army JAG Corps, and I touched down on American soil 3 weeks ago after a grueling 7-month deployment in Germany. The very first thing I did when I walked through my front door wasn't hugging the furniture. It was checking the hall closet for a specific cedar box. I had a gut feeling my mother would try to pull her usual, erasing, act on my daughter this Christmas Eve. I just didn't realize it would take an 8-year-old girl and that weathered wooden chest to finally make her crack. My daughter's name is Bella. My husband, Caleb, and I brought her home from foster care when she was just a tiny 8-month-old peanut. She's 8 years old now, and for every single one of those years, my mother has referred to her in private as the ward or not truly part of the legacy. For 8 years, my siblings and aunts just sat there, nodding along to the silence. What none of them realized was that my father, who passed away 2.5 years ago, spent his final summer drafting a document that only I held the key to. He sat me down on the dock of our lake cabin and told me exactly when to play my hand. 43 minutes after we sat down for our formal Christmas dinner, my 8-year-old daughter slid that cedar box across the mahogany table and delivered the line we'd been rehearsing for weeks. The wheels hit the tarmac at Minneapolis St. Paul on a freezing Sunday afternoon, the runway already blanketed in that thick, heavy November snow. I walked off the plane clutching my duffel, my Pelican gear case, and a manila folder I hadn't dared to open in over 2 years. Caleb was standing at the arrivals gate with Bella perched high on his shoulders. They were both rocking matching charcoal beanies. She scrambled down his back and tackled my waist before I could even drop my bags. She smelled like that green apple shampoo she loves, and the familiar scent of our family SUV. "You've put on some muscle, kiddo," I whispered into her hair. "And you got taller, Mom," she shot back with a grin. Caleb gave me a long, lingering kiss, grabbed my heavy duffel, and we headed out into the biting Minnesota cold. On the drive back to Hudson, Bella reached under her puffer jacket and pulled something out. It was Arthur's silver dog tag, the one with the visible dent from his time in Vietnam. She'd been wearing it as a talisman since the funeral. "I kept Grandpa close the whole time you were gone," she whispered. "I know you did, sweetheart," I replied. Caleb caught my eye in the rearview mirror. We didn't need to say anything. The holiday countdown was already pinned to the kitchen wall, and Christmas Eve was circled in a deep, bloody red. We had exactly 21 days. That night, after Bella was tucked in, I went to the hall closet. The cedar box was sitting on the top shelf, right where Caleb had moved it from our high-security storage unit. My father's distinct, shaky handwriting was on the brass tag. For Bella, when the moment is right. I traced the leather strap with my thumb. 3 weeks until the holiday. 3 weeks until the legal trust paperwork could officially be triggered. "You doing okay?" Caleb asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Yeah," I said, squaring my shoulders. "We're ready for this." The first shot was fired on a Tuesday morning via group text while I was flipping pancakes. It was from my mother, Alina. Subject line, Christmas Eve logistics. It read, "Hosting dinner at my place. Bringing special legacy gifts for Chloe and Leo. Bella is welcome to tag along too, of course." I read it twice. Then I read it again. That, of course, felt like a slap in the face. Bella climbed onto the stool next to me and read it over my shoulder. She didn't cry. She didn't pout. She just rested her head against my arm for a second before going back to her breakfast. Caleb, who was scrolling through work emails, looked up at my expression. I just turned the phone screen toward him. He didn't get angry. He got organized. He walked to his home office and returned with a thick, black 3-ring binder. He laid it on the counter and flipped to a specific section. "Folder 47, he said in a low, steady voice. This binder was a graveyard of insults. It was filled with photos, screenshots, printed emails, and transcribed voicemails spanning 8 years. Every holiday where Bella was left out, every birthday forgotten. There were voicemails from Aunt Martha and snarky forwards from my sister, Sarah. There was Alina's massive Christmas card list where Bella's name was always added in tiny, cramped handwriting at the very bottom, like a footnote. Caleb slipped the new text message into a plastic sleeve, noted the timestamp, and clicked the binder shut. 47 instances, he repeated. I'm home for the month, I told him. We have the cabin deeds. We have Dad's final letter. We have the attorney on speed dial. We just need her to show her hand one more time. She will, Caleb promised, and we'll be right there. After we dropped Bella at school, we sat back down with the binder. I hadn't seen the full extent of the record. Much of it happened while I was stationed overseas, and Caleb had shouldered the weight of it alone to protect me. Page 1. A photo from Bella's first birthday. Caleb is holding her, beaming. In the background, Alina is perfectly in focus, looking the other way, handing a generous gift card to my niece, Chloe. Caleb's note read, claimed she forgot Bella's gift because she didn't want to confuse the kids with different amounts. Page 8. An email from my sister Sarah to a cousin accidentally CCing Caleb back in 2019. It referred to Bella as Morgan's little charity project. The rest of the email was about organic catering. Page 16. A voicemail from Aunt Martha. Alina, do we really have to invite the adopted girl to Easter? My hip is acting up and the house is already crowded. Alina hadn't defended her granddaughter. She just replied, only for an hour, Martha. Page 23, a 2021 holiday card from Alina. Inside, 3 names were written in elegant red ink, Chloe, Leo, and Morgan. No Caleb, no Bella. The card was addressed to my beloved biological grandchildren. Page 41, a photo from last Christmas. Alina had handed Bella a $5 Starbucks card. The other kids were opening brand new Nintendo consoles and jewelry. I closed the binder and let my hand rest on the cover. Dad saw all of this, I whispered. He saw it happening before we even realized how deep it went. That's why he gave us the plan. That Sunday, I tucked Bella in. She was fiddling with Arthur's dog tag, the chain looped twice around her wrist. Mom, she asked softly, is Grandma going to read Grandpa's letter this year? I sat on the edge of her bed. This was the moment. I'd practiced my response 1,000 times, but looking at her, the perfect answer didn't matter. We'll see, honey. Maybe she will, and maybe she'll choose not to. What if she won't? Then I'll read it out loud so the whole room hears it, I promised. Bella watched the shadows on her ceiling. Grandpa wanted me to give it to her, right? Not you or Dad. That's right, because he said you were the bravest one in the family. What if I'm shaking? She asked. Then you do it while you're shaking. Being brave isn't about not being scared, Bella. It's about being terrified and still doing the right thing. She turned the dog tag over, touching the dented metal. Grandpa was scared in the war, wasn't he? Lots of times, I said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. I see you, Bella, and Grandpa saw you too. He never missed a thing. Christmas Eve morning arrived with a heavy snowfall before dawn. By 8:00 a.m., I was out shoveling the drive. The world looked like a perfect winter postcard, which was a total contrast to the storm brewing in my chest. I laid out my Army service uniform on the bed, the deep blues, the polished ribbons, the Vance nameplate. My mother had always demanded a uniform photo for her bragging album, but never actually put them on display. I wore it today because it represented the authority my father trusted me with. I tucked his dog tag under my collar, the cold metal warming up against my skin. Bella came in wearing a deep red velvet dress Caleb had picked out, paired with white tights and shiny black shoes. Her hair was in perfect French braids. She was wearing Arthur's old oversized watch on her wrist. Set to the wrong time, just because she liked the way it looked. You look like a hero from a movie, Mom, she said. And you look like a boss, I replied. Caleb appeared in the doorway in a sharp suit, holding the cedar box. He'd already stashed the legal documents under Bella's seat in the car. He kissed us both. Drive in, eat the food, stay frosty. Bella hands over the box during dessert. We leave on our own terms. Got it. Copy that, Bella said, giving a sharp little salute. Driving through Hudson in December is like driving through a movie set. Brick buildings, fairy lights, the river frozen solid. My mother's house was a massive Victorian on a hill, painted a shade of blue my father had always hated. The driveway was packed. Sarah's SUV, my brother David's truck, and Aunt Martha's old Buick with the plastic reindeer nose on the grill. Caleb parked, and I took a breath. Bella held the cedar box in her lap like it was made of glass. "We ready?" Caleb asked. "Ready," I said. We walked in, the brass bell on the door chiming our arrival. Alina met us in the foyer. She swarmed Sarah first, even though Sarah had been there for hours. She fawned over Chloe and Leo, then turned to me with a tight, superficial smile. "Morgan, you look thin. Is the army not feeding you?" She looked right past Bella. Literally, her eyes skipped over my daughter like she was a piece of furniture. "Oh, you brought her, of course." Bella didn't even blink. She'd been trained for this. She set the cedar box down by her boots. The kitchen was a chaotic mix of butter and spices. My mother was making her signature Christmas pavlova, a tradition she only kept because Martha liked it back in the 90s. Chloe and Leo were already at the counter, where Alina had set out personalized plates with their names in calligraphy. There was no plate for Bella. Caleb didn't say a word. He just reached into the cupboard, pulled out a plain white plate, and set it right next to mine. He put 2 cookies on it and nodded to Bella. She hopped onto the stool between us. I stood by the doorway, pretending to admire the window decorations. From there, I could hear Alina and Martha whispering by the oven. "Pat," Martha was saying, using my mom's middle name, "you don't have to go overboard for Bella. She's not really ours and you know it. Why pretend?" Alina let out a soft, dismissive laugh. "Well, Martha, you said it, not me. I'm just trying to be inclusive." Sarah walked by with a tray of rolls and didn't even look up. She'd clearly heard and didn't care. I felt my heart rate steady. This was the deposition phase. I had seen this behavior in the binder for years, but hearing it live, while my daughter sat 12 feet away, it solidified my resolve. Bella was staring at the snow outside. She'd heard them too. I could tell by the way her jaw tightened. But she just bit the edge of her gingerbread man, exactly the way my dad used to eat them. Dinner was served at 6:30 p.m. The table was set just like my father used to do it, green and gold runners, candles in the holders he'd hand-turned on his lathe decades ago. Alina sat Chloe on her right and Leo on her left. The real family. There were 2 empty chairs at the far end of the table for Caleb and me. And then there was a single, rickety folding chair at a tiny card table in the corner, where Alina had placed a paper plate and a juice box. Bella looked at the kids' table, then at me. Caleb was already moving. He picked up the folding chair, marched it over to the main table, and wedged it firmly between his seat and mine. He grabbed the paper plate and juice box, threw them in the trash, and replaced them with a real setting from the buffet. "Bella sits with us, Alina," Caleb said, his voice smooth and professional. "Always has, always will." Alina's face pinched like she'd sucked a lemon. Martha's eyebrows shot up. Sarah stared intently at her wine glass. "Of course," Alina said, her voice dropping an octave in fake cheerfulness. "More room for the dessert then. Sarah, bring the rolls." Bella sat between us, her feet resting on the cedar box tucked under her chair. The meal went exactly as expected. Aunt Martha told the same boring story from the 80s. David talked about sports. Sarah asked me 3 surface-level questions about Germany, carefully avoiding any mention of my daughter. Then the main event. Before the pavlova was even served, Alina announced, "Time for the heritage gifts." She wrapped them in expensive gold foil. She handed Chloe a flat, heavy rectangular box. "For my brilliant girl, open it." It was an iPad Pro, the top-of-the-line model, over $1,000. Chloe screamed with joy. Then Alina handed Leo a square box. "For my future engineer." A Nintendo Switch. The kids were ecstatic. Then Alina walked over to Bella. She handed her a small, flimsy white envelope with a look of mock pity. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Bella opened it. It was a generic drugstore card with a snowman on it. No money, No gift card, just a scribbled from Grandma. Chloe looked up from her new tablet. Wait, where's Bella's iPad? Eleanor hissed. Chloe, honey, shush. We have family rules about these things. The rules that only applied to the child who didn't share their blood. Then Eleanor reached for a small velvet box on the tree. She knelt by Chloe's chair and opened it to reveal a shimmering gold heart pendant. This belonged to your great-grandmother Jones. I've kept it safe for 19 years, and now I'm giving it to my real granddaughter. The word real hung in the air like a poisonous gas. I gripped my napkin. I felt the dog tag against my skin and took a slow, tactical breath. This was it. Mom, Bella said quietly, may I go to the bathroom? Go ahead, baby. Come right back. As Bella slipped away, leaving the cedar box under her chair, Eleanor pulled out one last envelope and handed it to Leo. And this is for your college fund, my little man, from me and Aunt Martha. Leo opened it, and the room went silent as he pulled out a check. It was for a staggering amount. The script, Part 2. 5 crisp $100 bills sat fanned out on the table. Leo's eyes went wide. Whoa, check that out! He looked at the cash, then back at his mother. Sarah beamed, her chest puffed out with pride. What do you say, Leo? Thank your grandma and your Aunt Martha. Aunt Martha let out a sharp, jagged laugh. Now, don't you go blowing that all on Fortnite skins or candy. He's probably already mentally spent it on Pokémon cards, David chimed in. It was the most my brother had contributed to the conversation all night. A log shifted in the wood stove, sending a shower of sparks behind the glass. The living room was thick with the scent of expensive cedar kindling and the cloying smell of burnt brown sugar wafting from the kitchen. Sarah poured herself a heavy 4th glass of Cabernet. Eleanor followed suit, and they clinked glasses with a smug, knowing look. Blood is thicker than water, Aunt Martha said, addressing the room but looking at no one in particular. That's just the natural order of things. Always has been, always will be. Bella walked back from the bathroom just then, her footsteps light and purposeful on the hardwood. She climbed back into the rickety folding chair between Caleb and me, her small hands folded neatly in her lap. She stared at the crumbs on her plate. Eleanor didn't reach for another envelope. She didn't even acknowledge Bella had returned. Caleb reached under the table and gave my knee a firm, grounding squeeze. Steady, he was telling me. Hold the line. Don't react yet. I didn't move a muscle. I picked up my water glass, took a measured sip, and set it back down in its exact original spot. I pushed a piece of brisket around my plate with a fork, though I had no intention of eating another bite. Bella looked at me, then at Caleb, then down at the cedar box resting against her boots. Finally, she looked at the space in the center of the table where the dessert should be. Mom, she whispered, is it time yet? Almost, I murmured back. Across from us, Chloe was still fidgeting with that antique gold pendant. She kept rubbing the engraved C with her thumb, looking thoughtful. I'd always had a soft spot for Chloe. She was a sweet kid caught in a bitter system. She didn't know the rules her mother and grandmother played by, which was exactly why she was the only one with a conscience left. Mom, Chloe asked, looking at Sarah. Bella didn't get a big present. Why didn't Bella get an iPad? Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. Chloe, honey, just eat your pie. But she's our cousin. It's not fair. She's adopted, Chloe. It's different, Sarah said. The word adopted hit the air like a slur, like a grease stain on a white silk dress. She said it as if she were explaining a technicality about a stranger rather than talking about my daughter. I watched Bella. She didn't flinch or cry. She just stared at the candle flame in front of her. The wick flickered left, then right, then stood perfectly still. David coughed into his beer, refusing to meet anyone's eyes. Eleanor closed her eyes for a split second, a micro-expression of annoyance I'd learned to spot a mile away before taking another long pull of her wine. Chloe didn't pick up her fork. That's not how cousins work, she insisted. Chloe, we are absolutely not having this discussion at the dinner table, Sarah snapped. What discussion? Chloe persisted, turning to Bella. I'm really sorry, Bella. Bella looked up and gave her that small, guarded smile I'd seen since she was a toddler. "It's okay, Chloe. Really." "No, it's not," Chloe muttered to her plate. The room went deathly silent. I felt Caleb's hand tighten on my knee. Now, the dessert was coming out. We were in the endgame. As Sarah continued to scold Chloe and Alina pretended to be fascinated by the centerpiece, my mind drifted back to the dock. July 2023. The last summer my father, Arthur, was alive. None of us knew the clock was ticking, but looking back, Arthur knew. He knew before the doctors even put a name to it. It was a humid Tuesday afternoon. Caleb and Bella were inside the cabin making blueberry pancakes, and I was sitting on the edge of the dock with my dad. He wore his favorite blue work shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal those sun-beaten, muscular forearms that only 40 years of carpentry can give a man. He handed me a thick manila folder. The label was in his familiar, steady cursive, Vance Family Irrevocable Trust. "What's this, Dad? This looks like private estate stuff." "It's a private trust," he said, his eyes fixed on the horizon of the lake. "I had a guy named Miller drafted up in Duluth. Your mother doesn't know him. He's my guy, not the family lawyer." "Dad, why are you doing this now?" He adjusted his fishing line, squinting at the water. "Ivy, I'm not going to see many more of these sunsets. My heart is giving out. Congestive failure, the docs say. I haven't told Alina. I'm not going to. She'd just find a way to make my passing about her schedule." "Dad, don't say that." "Listen to me," he interrupted, his voice turning to steel. "I see how your mother treats Bella. I have eyes, Ivy. I've had 8 years of eyes. The day you brought that baby home, your mother sat in that kitchen and told me Bella wasn't her real legacy. I never forgot it. I never forgot a single word she used to belittle that little girl." I held the folder, feeling the weight of it. "The lake cabin, it's in the trust now," he continued. "The sole beneficiary is Bella Rose Vance. There's a separate account at North Star Bank, about $85,000 in bonds and the cash from my shop equipment sale. It vests the moment Bella turns 8. I will not have her left out in the cold by your mother's pettiness. Not on my watch, and certainly not after I'm gone." He handed me a second envelope, cream-colored, high-quality paper, sealed with a custom wax stamp he'd made from a brass button. "To be opened by Alina in front of the family when Bella is ready," it read. "I built the box yesterday," he told me. "Cedar, it's in the shop. Bella helped me sand the lid. She doesn't know what's inside, but she knows it's hers." Back at the Christmas table, looking at the empty Hallmark card Alina had gifted my daughter, I knew exactly what was about to happen. For the next 43 minutes, the power dynamic in this family was going to shift permanently. I leaned over and whispered to Bella, "I see you, Bella. You know the move." She nodded, her voice barely a breath. "When the pie hits the table, right, Mom? And you'll read the letter if she won't." "Every word of it," I promised. Alina was watching me now, that flat, polite mask firmly in place. "Is there a problem, Morgan? You've always been so sensitive. I suppose all that military travel makes it hard for the girl to sit still." I didn't give her the satisfaction of an answer. Bella reached down and gripped the leather strap of the cedar box. She didn't lift it yet. She just held it, the way a soldier holds a gear bag before a jump. That strap was scuffed right near the buckle from years of my dad carrying it. Bella knew every notch in that wood. She remembered sitting on Arthur's lap while the smell of cedar sawdust filled the air. He told her then, "This is something you give to Grandma when the time is right." Sarah emerged from the kitchen carrying a massive apple pie on a glass pedestal. She set it down dead center, next to a pitcher of heavy cream. Aunt Martha began slicing, handing the first piece to Alina. Alina waved it off and stood up, tapping her wine glass with a butter knife. The room went quiet. "I just want to say a few words," Alina began, looking at Chloe and Leo with a doting smile. She pointedly looked through Bella. "Family is the only thing that matters. Arthur, God rest him, used to say it all the time. Family is blood. Sophie, Leo, you are my heart. We don't do half measures here. We provide for our own." David shifted uncomfortably. Sarah's eyes were glassy from the wine. Caleb silently reached for his phone, hit the record button on a voice memo app, and placed it face down on the table. "To the children," Alina toasted, raising her glass. Sarah, Martha, and David followed suit. Caleb and I stayed frozen. Bella kept her eyes on her lap. Alina sat back down, looking incredibly pleased with herself. Now, speaking of the future. Sarah, I've been thinking about the lake cabin. Since I've been running it as an Airbnb, it's been a nice little earner. I think we should use this year's profits to screen in the porch and fix the dock. The guests keep complaining about the bugs. Caleb's hand squeezed my knee again. Alina was sitting there, casually telling the family how she planned to spend money from a property she hadn't legally owned for over 2 years. She was monetizing my father's legacy right in front of the 8-year-old girl who actually owned the deed. I gave Bella the smallest nod. Bella set her fork down. She wiped her mouth with her napkin, folded it perfectly, and slid out of her chair. She reached down and hoisted the cedar box with both hands. It was heavy, but she carried it with a strength that made my heart ache. She walked the long way around the table, past Sarah, past David, past Aunt Martha. The floorboards groaned under her shoes. Sarah's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. "Bella, sweetie, what are you doing?" Bella didn't answer. She kept walking until she reached the head of the table. She set the box directly in front of Alina, sliding it forward until it clicked against my mother's china plate. She stood at attention, chin up, hands at her sides, exactly the way her grandfather had taught her. "Grandma," Bella said, her voice small but piercingly clear. "Mom told me to give this to you if you ever ignored me again." Alina stared at the box, then at Bella, then shot a look of pure venom at me. Aunt Martha let out a nervous, high-pitched titter. "Oh, is this a game? How cute." "What is this, Morgan?" Alina's voice was dangerously low. Bella didn't say a word. She'd been briefed. Deliver the goods, then hold the line. The room was so quiet you could hear the snow hitting the window pane. Alina looked at the brass tag. She recognized the handwriting. I watched the blood drain from her face in real time. "Ivy," she whispered, using my middle name. "What did you do?" "It's not from me, Alina. It's from Bella. Open it." Alina's hand trembled as she reached for the latch. The cedar smell wafted out, rich, oily, and unmistakable. Inside the box were 3 distinct items, 2 manila folders and a cream-colored envelope with a wax seal. On top of it all was a photograph of Arthur, tan and smiling on the dock, with a 2-year-old Bella sitting on his lap, tugging at his beard. Alina made a jagged, choking sound. She didn't touch the photo. She went straight for the first folder, Vance Family Irrevocable Trust. She read the first page, then the second. When she got to the legal description of the lake cabin under trust assets, she stopped breathing. "This isn't real," she stammered. "This has to be a joke. Arthur would never." "Check the signature, Alina. Check the notary. It was executed months before he passed." She flipped to the deed transfer. "Lake cabin, 360 acres, Pine County. Beneficiary, Bella Rose Vance. Trustee, Morgan Vance." "You knew," she hissed at me. "You knew while I was renting it out." "I've known since the day he signed it on the dock." Alina picked up the cream envelope. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. She broke the wax seal and began to read silently. Her face didn't just go pale, it went translucent. She reached the end of the page and folded it back up, her eyes wet. "I can't read this out loud." She whispered. "Read it, Alina," I said, standing up. "He wrote it specifically to be read in front of the family. If you won't do it, I will." I walked around the table and took the letter from her limp fingers. I didn't look at her. I looked at the family who had spent 8 years being complicit in her cruelty. I used my Major Vance voice, the one that doesn't brook any argument. "Alina," I began, reading my father's words. "I am writing this because I know you measure people by the wrong yardstick. You measure them by blood and by ego. You do not measure them by love or by who actually shows up. I have forgiven you a lot in 40 years, but I will not forgive you for how you treat my granddaughter." The script, Part 3. "I have forgiven you for the way you looked down on our daughter, Morgan, when she first enlisted. I have forgiven you for how you treated Martha's first husband. I have even forgiven the way you treated my own mother." I paused, The air in the dining room felt vacuum-sealed. No one moved. I kept my eyes on the paper and continued. But I cannot, and will not, forgive you for how you've treated our granddaughter, Bella. My voice was a steady, low hum. I've read harrowing reports in active war zones. I could handle a suburban dining room. From the very second Morgan and Caleb carried that baby into our home, you made a conscious choice that she didn't belong. I watched you make that choice in the kitchen with your back turned to me. You whispered that she wasn't real family. I never forgot that. I haven't forgotten a single cruel syllable you've uttered about that girl. Aunt Martha's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes darting around like a trapped bird. You ignored her first birthday. You forgot her christening. You sent Chloe a college bond and gave Bella a coloring book. I even heard you telling your friend Diane at the 2019 cookout that you were just tolerating her presence. I was right there on the other side of the fence with the dogs. I heard it all. David set his beer down slowly, his face turning a shade of gray. I am writing this, I read, because I don't believe you'll ever change. I spent years hoping you would. I spent years showing you photos of her on my phone, waiting for a spark of grandmotherly love. But I realize now that my hope is going to die before I do. So I've done what I should have done back in 2017. I have placed the lake cabin into an irrevocable trust for Bella. I have placed my retirement bonds into that trust. I have placed every cent from the sale of my shop tools into that trust. It is final. It cannot be contested. My lawyer made sure the paperwork is bulletproof. I turned the page, the crisp paper echoing in the silence. She is my granddaughter in every way that counts. If you are reading this, Alina, it means you've failed her one last time. You've pushed her aside on a day that was supposed to be about family. So now she has a home you can never take from her. And it isn't the home you've been illegally renting out for profit. Sign the audit papers. Pay back the trust. And for once in your life, look at the child you've refused to see. Signed, Arthur. I folded the letter with military precision and set it gently on the table next to the cedar box. Let's take a second here. That was my father's voice, speaking from the grave 2.5 years later. I'm a JAG officer. I've stared down high-ranking officials in courtrooms, but nothing was harder than reading that truth to my mother on Christmas Eve. If you've ever wished a loved one could come back for just 5 minutes to set the record straight, drop a heart in the comments. And make sure you're subscribed, because the next 8 minutes are the payoff of a 5-year battle. Alina didn't speak. She kept her hand over her eyes, shielding herself from the room. Aunt Martha was the first to crack the silence. Alina, honey, he didn't mean it like that. He was just... He meant every word, Martha, I interrupted. He told me on the dock exactly what he was going to write. He didn't stutter then, and he didn't stutter in this letter. Alina finally lowered her hand. Her face was a mask of shock. She grabbed the trust folder and flipped frantically to the deed page. She saw the transfer. Then she saw the audit clause. The audit clause required the trustee, me, to claw back every cent of income generated by the property since it entered the trust on June 14, 2023. Alina had been pocketing heirloom money for over 80 weeks. According to the math Caleb, and I did with a financial counselor, she owed the trust roughly $96,000 in principal. With the 7% interest penalty Dad had insisted on, the total was hovering around $103,000. Alina read that number twice. She stood up so abruptly her chair slammed into the wainscoting. She was still clutching her wine glass so hard her knuckles were white. Suddenly, the glass hairline fractured in her grip. A single drop of red wine trailed down her wrist like blood. He gave her the cabin. Then she let out a sound. It wasn't a cry. It was a sharp, wordless shriek, the kind of sound a person makes when they realize the ground has vanished beneath them. He gave the cabin to her, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Bella. Aunt Martha was up now, hovering. Alina, stay calm, we'll fix this. We'll find a loophole. She isn't really family, Alina, you said it yourself. We'll get a lawyer and... That sentence hit the room like a grenade. But this time, nobody was nodding. Chloe covered her mouth, her eyes wide with horror. David turned to look at Martha, his expression shifting into one of pure realization, like a man who just realized he'd been sleeping in a house of snakes for a decade. Sarah looked away, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Eleanor turned slowly to her sister. Martha. I'm just saying, Eleanor, we can. Martha, shut up, Eleanor snapped. It was the first time she'd ever spoken to her sister like that. Martha's mouth hung open for a second before she slumped back into her chair, silent. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. I looked at Bella. She was still standing at attention by the table, her chin high, her spirit unbroken. She hadn't flinched once, not at the scream, not at the insults. Bella, sweetheart, I said softly, come back and sit with me. Bella walked the long way back. The floor creaked under her Mary Janes. Martha wouldn't look at her. Eleanor wouldn't look at her. But Sarah? Sarah watched my daughter every step of the way. For 8 years, Sarah had followed our mother's lead. For 8 years, she'd cut her own daughter's pie and ignored my girl. I saw Sarah's face crumble just for a second. She looked at Chloe, who was staring at her with judgment, then back at Bella. Bella gave her that same polite, careful smile. Sarah didn't apologize, not yet, but she looked down at her plate, her shoulders shaking. I waited. I waited until the room was so still you could hear the fire crackling. I waited until I had everyone's eyes. Then I stood up. Not for drama, but with the presence of an officer reading a verdict. Eleanor, I said. She looked up at me. Let me be very clear about how this goes. The Vance family trust is irrevocable. It was executed by Dad and witnessed by his shop foreman, Russell. You remember Russell? He'd testify in a heartbeat. Eleanor tried to speak, but I cut her off. I'm not finished. The trust includes the cabin, 360 acres of prime land, 80,000 in savings bonds, and the proceeds from the shop. As of October 22nd, you lost all legal authority over that property. You've been essentially stealing from a trust for over a year. I let that sink in. The audit starts January 7th. You'll get the certified notice in the mail. I'm not the one asking for that $100,000 back, Eleanor. The law is. I'm just the one making sure it happens. Eleanor's face went from white to a deep, mottled red. She pointed a shaking finger at me. You knew. You let me rent it out. You watched me. Your own mother. You let me commit a crime. No, Eleanor, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I let you choose. Every single month I gave you a chance to be the woman Dad thought you were. And every month you chose the money over your granddaughter. You had 2.5 years to do the right thing. You chose this. He would never do this to me, she wailed. He did do it. He gave me the key to the lawyer's office. He gave me the tag for the box. He trusted me to know exactly when the family he built had officially become a lie. And tonight, you proved him right. Eleanor buried her face in her hands and let out a low, guttural moan of genuine grief. Bella watched her, but she didn't look afraid or even happy. She looked at Eleanor the way a person looks at a storm that has finally passed. I knelt by Bella and smoothed her hair. I see you, Bella. Grandpa saw me, too. She whispered. He sure did. Caleb was already standing. He grabbed Bella's coat and helped her into it, buttoning it up to her chin. He tucked the cedar box under one arm and Dad's letter into his jacket pocket. I looked at the table one last time. Eleanor, the cabin needs to be vacated and the keys turned over to us by July 1st. Martha, don't bother calling. Not for birthdays, not for holidays. Sarah, if Chloe wants to write to Bella when she's older, that's her choice. But until then, stay away. David just nodded. He wasn't the hero of this story, but at least he wasn't fighting the truth anymore. We walked out. The brass bell on the door rang one last time as the freezing Minnesota air hit our faces. We piled into the SUV, and the engine groaned to life. As we pulled out of the driveway, the house with all its expensive lights looked small and cold in the rearview mirror. About 10 minutes into the drive, Bella spoke up from the back seat. Mom, will Grandma ever say sorry? Probably not, kiddo. That's okay, she said, hugging the cedar box. I really like the cabin. Caleb smiled. Good, because we're going there this summer. The wipers ticked against the snow. The heater hummed. Mom, Bella asked, can I bring my best friend Maya from school? I laughed, a real, genuine laugh that I hadn't felt in weeks. Baby, you can bring the whole school if you want. It's your cabin. Our cabin, she corrected me. Yeah, our cabin. She leaned her head against the wood of the box and fell asleep before we even hit the highway. The audit was settled by March. Alina ended up paying the trust $113,000 after all the fees were tallied. She didn't come to Bella's spring play, and I didn't invite her. Sarah sent a short email in February that just said, "I'm sorry I was too blind to see her." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. The cedar box sits on our mantel now. Arthur's dog tag is draped over it, the silver reflecting the light. We're heading to the lake in May with a carload of Bella's friends. If there's one thing I learned from my father, it's this. Family isn't defined by the blood in your veins. It's defined by the person who makes sure there's always a seat at the table for you, even when everyone else is trying to take it away. That's the story of a wooden box, a grandfather's foresight, and a little girl who was always real enough for the people who actually mattered. If you've got a chosen family that's worth more than gold, share this video. Thanks for watching Real Reddit Revenge. I'll see you in the next one.